I'm gonna wait for a few minutes to let everybody get logged in. I got people coming in right now, and so I'm gonna give it a couple more minutes and we'll kick it off. So just hang tight with us. We'll get it started in a minute. All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our public hearing. I just want to make sure it looks like we are recording now, so that's good. All right. So welcome everybody to our public hearing. This is for the Van Horn Beachside Farms LLC lake creation and sand dune mining permit applications in Saugatuck Township. My name is Jim Ostrowski and I work in Eagle's Environmental Support Division, and I will be your moderator for tonight. And I'm just going to go through a few things here in terms of housekeeping, especially for those of you who had never been on a online public meeting. I know it's kind of a new experience for many people. So we'll walk you through that, do our best. So in terms of the way that tonight's going to work, we're going to, it's basically split into two different parts. We've got an informal part of our evening, which is an informational session. We're going to be hearing from some Eagle staff here that will be presenting on the proposed project. And we're going to spend a little time answering your questions. It's informal. So if you have questions, you can type them in or raise your hand, and I'll explain how to do that when we get to that point. But that's your chance to answer some questions. And so we'll take that till about 6:30 or so, 6:35 maybe, because we got a little bit later start. And then after that, we will kick off the official public hearing. So the public hearing part, after we go through the questions and answers, that's when it's official time to make your public comment for the record. The Q&A part is not for the record. It's the question, that's just Q&A. It's the part when we read through the hearing statement and I tell you when we're starting the public hearing, that's when your comments are for the record. And we'll call you up, we'll explain how we're going to do that when that happens. That's when you can make your official comment. We'll also wrap it up tonight and talk about where you can find more information and all that good stuff. So in terms of what you see in front of you right now, you've got a Zoom toolbar. Not a whole lot you can do. The lines are all muted right now. When it gets to the point where we're going to take Q&A, we'll explain how we're going to unmute your lines. So you can ask a question if you want. You also see a little Q&A box in there, so you can type questions in there if you have them at the right time. Like I said earlier, we're recording this. So if you miss part of it or you want to share it with somebody else, we'll be sending out the recording. It'll also be on our YouTube channel after we're done. All right, at this time, I want to introduce the staff that are here with me tonight. So I'm going to have them turn on their cameras and join us. Very good. So Jason, go ahead.
Evening, my name is Jason Combs. I'm with the Water Resources Division out of the Kalamazoo District Office, and I'll be one of the hearing officers for tonight.
Okay, Mark.
Hey, good evening too. Mark Snow. I'm the Permitting and Technical Services Section Manager with Oil, Gas, and Minerals Division.
And Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Farragon. I'm a geologist and permit coordinator with Oil, Gas, Minerals Division, Permits and Bonding Unit.
And Stafford.
Good evening. My name is Stafford Dusenberry. I'm the OGMD inspector out of the Kalamazoo office.
All right, great. And so we're all kind of in our home offices here tonight, broadcasting from different areas of the state, just like some of you are in your homes, I'm sure. So you're going to be hearing from them throughout this first part. And I also want to let you know that Ryan Blazek's also on, and so you might be getting some chat messages in the chat screen from him a little bit later on tonight. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Jason, And Jason, you want to go ahead and do your presentation?
Sure. Thanks, Jim. Essentially, what I'll be doing is just giving you a very brief overview of the Van Horn site plans for the permit application with the Water Resources Division. So just one thing to make sure that to be clear on is that while this is one project, it actually, based on state regulations, requires two different permits, one from the Water Resources Division and one from the Oil, Gas, and Minerals Division. So Jim, next slide, please. Next slide, please. Just to go and discuss where it's located at. The mine location is located in Saugatuck Township in Allegan County. It's located south of 135th Avenue, east of 66th Street, and then northwest of Washington Road. You can see in the aerial image there where it's kind of showing a beginning of where an existing pond has been excavated at this point in time. Next slide, please. So to give a brief description, what Water Resources Division is reviewing is the actual creation of a lake, which is basically, at this point, there's an existing pond on site. It's being expanded to approximately 10.7 acres in size by excavating about 180,000 cubic yards from the upland. The final dimensions for the Water Resources permit is 1,653 feet long, which you can see going north to south, following the what will be cross section A, which we'll show you in a moment. It'll be 295 feet wide, so basically from east to west, and then up to 20 feet deep, a maximum depth of 20 feet. If you go to the next slide, please, you'll see, next slide after that, you'll see the cross sections that for the lake. These are the north-south cross sections, and then next slide. Next slide for that, please. Is then the the east-west cross section. Now these are available on our website, MyWaters, and we'll be providing a link later on where you can see where download these documents, take a look at them, provide comments. I believe that pretty much covers my description. So I'll hand it over to Jennifer for the Oil, Gas, and Minerals permit.
Thank you, Jason. So tonight I'll be presenting an overview of Part 637 Sand Dune Mining Regulations and the Chad and Jenny Van Horn's Sand Dune Mining Permit application, which, as Jason mentioned, is located in Saugatuck Township of Allegan County. The Oil, Gas, Minerals Division, OGMD, administers the Part 637 Sand Dune Mining Regulations of the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act, or NERPA. A permit is required for sand dune mining. Next slide. Some brief historical information to help you understand the regulations. Sand mining along Michigan's western shores dates back to the early 1900s. In an effort to initiate wise management of the dune areas, the Sand Dune Protection and Management Act, Public Act 222, was enacted by the legislature in 1976. 275,000 acres were designated by the department as sand dune areas, and the regulations applied to sand mining only. Next slide. In the 1989 amendments to the Sand Dune Protection and Management Act, 74,000 acres were designated as critical dune areas. Additional protections were created beyond mining. In 1994, these protections were made into law as Part 353, Sand Dunes Protection and Management, and were split from Part 637, Sand Dune Mining of the NERPA. In 1995, there were amendments to Part 637 that are today's sand dune mining and reclamation requirements. Next slide. So what exactly is sand dune mining? It is defined in Part 637 as removal of sand from a designated sand dune area for commercial or industrial purposes or both. A designated sand dune area is located within 2 miles of a Great Lake and includes landforms made primarily of sand. Looking at the map on this slide, The area dotted in green is the designated sand dune area. The orange star shows the area where the Van Horn site is located. The darker teal blue area along the coast of Lake Michigan is a critical dune area. As you can see, the proposed mine area is outside of a critical dune area. Next slide. Michigan has had 34 total sand dune mines. At this time, 27 have been closed, 6 are actively permitted, and 1 site is in reclamation. The active sites are shown here on this map, and the orange star shows the approximate location of the site. Next slide. As you can see from this bar graph, the sand dune mining regulations have reduced the volumes of sand that have been mined annually since the regulations have been enacted. Next slide. As I mentioned earlier, sand dune areas are designated by the department. To give you a quick overview of where the sand dune areas are located, I've included a map showing the 13 designated sand dune areas in Michigan, which are shown in the map on the left. Sand dune areas also include critical dune areas. The map on the right show the townships that contain critical dune areas across the state. Next slide. The Van Horn sand dune mining proposal is to excavate sand to expand a recently created pond. At this point in time, there is about a 5-acre pond with stockpiles of excavating sand on site. The proposal is to remove excavated and stockpiled sand from the property in the sand dune area. It may be used for commercial or industrial purposes. Next slide. Some background on the site. In 2020, the Oil, Gas, and Minerals Division, OGMD, responded to complaints at different times that sand was being removed from the site. OGMD inspected the site several times. Early in the year, it was found the activity did not require a permit. In October, OGMD observed sand was removed from the property in the sand dune area. Mr. Van Horn was issued a violation notice and was required to stop removing sand from the site, inform OGMD how much sand had been removed, and submit a Part 637 application for sand dune mining permit, which they did comply with. Next slide. In order to receive a Part 637 sand dune mining permit, a person must submit several documents. The required information is prescribed in the regulations and includes the following: a permit application form, an environmental impact statement, a mining and reclamation plan, and a 15-year mining plan. A copy of the Van Horn permit application may be found on Eagle's sand dune mining webpage. Next. So here are the application documents showing the current site plan on the left, existing pond and temporary stockpiles of sand. The proposed excavation extent and grades are shown on the map on the right. The proposed map shows a dark oval surrounding the pond within the lighter contour lines. This indicates the anticipated extent of the pond based on groundwater elevations. You may notice that there will be excavation in the southernmost parcels to the west. This area is not included in the mine application. Sand excavated from these lots is to remain on site and used for site grading purposes. Next slide, please. The environmental impact statement must address a number of physical factors and considerations, such as compatibility with adjacent land use, impacts to various natural elements, and must identify nearby buildings. A discussion to alternative locations is also a requirement. Supplemental documentation, next slide. Supplemental documentation supporting the environmental impact statement includes a plant and animal survey from 2018-2019, a hydrogeologic report, and additional air quality discussion to expand on the initial response in the application. Next slide. The Van Horn Mining and Reclamation Plan has several documents. This plan shows the mining will be mechanical from south to north, and within the cell units will go from west to east. Buffer areas, landscaping, and screening is included. There are 3 cell units required to be 10 acres or less. No more than 3 cell units may be actively mined at a given time. The southern lots will be excavated. Sand will remain on site and used for grading. As I mentioned earlier, the lots are not included in the proposed permit area. Next page. Additional maps submitted with the mining and reclamation plan also include surface overburden stripping plans. The site was cleared when the pond was originally created, location of stockpiles, and a 50-foot buffer from the property line. In the map on the right, the final slopes are shown in specific areas with a description on minimizing trespass to the site. Go ahead, next slide. Lastly, the mining and reclamation plan shows sand removal depth. The cross-section on the left shows slopes as if the site were sliced along the top half of the map. The cross-section shows sand will be excavated 20 feet below the top of groundwater. Next slide. The 15-year mining plan contains information on the location and number of acres to be mined. The amount of sand to be mined is roughly 420,000 cubic yards. For reference, sand can weigh 1.5 tons per cubic yard, but this can vary due to factors such as moisture content, for example. The mining schedule and approximate end date is anticipated to be April 28th, 2024, which the applicant states is the end date of the township approval. The applicant has provided notice to the County Soil Conservation District along with a copy of the mining and reclamation plan. Conservation District is provided an opportunity to comment. Next slide. Other Part 637 requirements. Financial assurance or bonding must be provided before mining begins and is $20,000 per cell unit. Permittees are subject to a surveillance fee based on annual volume reporting, not to exceed 10 cents per ton. A permit is valid for 5 years. The department is required by statute to renew the permit if the mining activity is in compliance with the laws, rules, and conditions of the permit. Go ahead. Lastly, reclamation in Part 637 specifies slopes. 80% vegetative cover is allowed to establish itself for at least one growing season. And root development for sustainable growth is also another factor that's considered. The site is inspected by OGMD field staff throughout the life of the mine and for final mine closure and bond release. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jennifer. So, thanks for that presentation, both Jason and Jennifer. Right now, I'm going to open it up to questions that any of you might have. So if you have a question, you can type it into the question box on your Zoom toolbar you got there, or you can click the raise hand icon. And it looks like we do have a couple people that are calling in on the phone. So if you're calling in the phone, I realize you can't see our slides. If you hit #2, that'll raise your hand for us to see you and we'll unmute your line. So if you're on the phone and you got a question, hit #2 and I will call your name and you can talk that way. So just checking to see if we got any questions. I want to tell people too that we've got about 36 people logged into the hearing tonight. All right, so first question that's come in, the person's asking, did the first stage of this project require permits? The initial pond that you showed there. Jennifer, do you want to start?
Yes, I will. As far as Part 637 sand dune mining goes, it has not required permits due to the fact that sand was not removed from the site. It was observed in October that there was some sand that had been removed from the site. And so as a result, they have applied for this permit in order to have an after the fact component to make sure that they are under compliance. And then we are also reviewing their future sand excavation and removal plans. And I believe there's a Part 301 aspect to the project as well. Jason, if you wanted to respond about that.
You're muted, Jason.
Sure. So the question about did the first stage require permits under Part 301, it did not require a permit. dredging out creating a lake or creating a pond only requires a permit if it's either within 500 feet of an existing water body, such as a lake or a stream, which it was not. Whether if it's impacting regulated wetlands, which it was not, or if it ended up being 5 acres or more in size. So based on our interpretation, it was less than 5 acres in size. It was not within 500 feet of any water bodies. I also forgot to mention, I know there's the sand dune mining area. There's also the critical dune mining area, or the critical dune area, which is this location is not within that critical dune area. So it didn't require any type of permit under the critical dune laws either.
All right. Looks like we got someone with their hand up. Richard, we're going to unmute your line. So Richard, you've been unmuted. So if you want to go to mute yourself, you'll see something pop up on your screen. You should be able to mute yourself and you can ask your question. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Am I on?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I have two questions. The first is, are you saying that no permit was required? Are you saying that on advice of the department's legal counsel, or is that your own call?
So thank you. So do you guys want to address that? I guess, I don't know, whether that be Jennifer, Mark, or Jason.
Well, I could certainly answer under Part 301. 301 has specific legal criteria, which was described earlier, that if a water body that's less than 5 acres in size is not considered to be a lake and therefore doesn't need a permit unless it is impacting wetlands, or if it's or critical dune areas, which they were not, or if it's within 500 feet or less, or have a direct connection to another water body. So based on those criteria, it didn't meet any of those criteria, therefore it didn't need a permit initially.
All right, thanks, Jason. Next person got their hand up, Roy. So we're going to unmute Roy. Go ahead, Roy. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, there I am. Question is, has there ever been a certified survey done to determine that the pond/lake is less than 5 acres? The neighbors have done, I think Eagle's aware, folks are aware that there was the mission of 3 different methods of determining the size of the pond, and it all came out around 6.5 acres. And of course, if that's the case, and if no survey, a formal survey was ever done, it seems to me before anything else is decided, that has to be determined if he violated state law by digging the pond more than making it bigger than a 5 acre pond. That's my question. So I guess I need to know if a real survey was done or just eyeballed.
All right, who wants to deal with that? Jason or Jennifer? In terms of the survey. Oh, you're muted again, Jason.
Right. So it was basic. Last time WRD was on the site was back in June. I should put out there. So if you're asking like a actual formal survey by a actual professional surveyor, no, that was not done. It was more based on based on the site inspection, review of aerial imagery. That's how they, it was, and based on what the permits that were provided or that the applicant applied for with the Saugatuck Township, which listed it at, I believe, 4.7 acres in size.
All right, thanks. Got a lot of questions here in the question box. First one, how will the sand mine affect neighboring groundwater?
I'll
Take
answer
that one,
Are you
Jen.
gonna you're gonna take it, Mark? Okay.
Well, the applicant did submit a hydrogeo in association with the application. And so if you click those links that were provided or go to our webpage, you can download the entire application. But basically, there's not going to be any dewatering associated with the sand removal. And the only real impact is going to be now you're going to have exposed water there that's going to be exposed to the elements per se and have the potential to evaporate. Whereas if it was groundwater covered with sand, that impact would not exist. And so there's a very minimal amount of drawdown that was associated with that evaporation process. That's expected, further out after the pond is created. So very, very minimal impact, especially because there's no dewatering taking place for the activity.
All right. How will you distinguish between sand that was removed prior to this permit and this excavation? So I guess I should read that better. How will you distinguish between sand that was removed prior to this permit and this excavation?
I can answer that. So one of the things that we had requested of the applicant was to find out an estimated amount of how much sand had been removed from the site and the sand dune area, which was found to occur last October. And it appears to be an estimated amount of about 3,000 cubic yards. And that was to be used for residential recreational purposes. However, there may have been a little bit of commingling of sand at the commercial contractor's site. So it would just be included under a permit, under one permit. And we are aware of the volume of sand that was removed from the site prior to the cessation of activity.
Okay, next question that's come in. If the southernmost lots are not part of the sand dune mining permit, has a calculation been done on the amount of sand that will be excavated and left on site? Based on the drawing, that doesn't seem practical at all. So Jennifer?
We have not calculated that actual cubic yardage. It's going to be handled through observation of activities on site. We do have Stafford as our inspector. He'll be on site during various parts of the excavation.
Okay. How did you determine that the pond is under 5 acres? It looks larger than 6 acres.
I think that was a previous question. So basically, just to reiterate, it was based on last time Water Resources Division staff conducted a site inspection was back in June of 2020. Is based on the site inspection and based on interpretation of aerial imagery, and also looking at what was already provided to the Saugatuck Township as they also required their own permit as well.
All right. This one looks like a timeline question or whatever. It says was Mr. Van Horn told in a letter by Eagle in August 2020 that he would need a permit to remove sand?
We did respond to a complaint earlier in 2020 and sent out a communication to Mr. Van Horn. And upon our site inspection, we saw that there wasn't sand at that point in time being removed from the sand dune area. So that did not constitute sand dune mining at that point. But we did mention that if the sand would be removed from the sand dune area, that they did need to obtain a permit.
Okay, we've got time for a few more questions. I realize we got a few more in the hopper here to ask. Oh, here it is. Okay. When the township issued the permit for the existing pond, was sand addressed? So it's kind of going back to a little bit what we discussed before. So when existing pond, was any sand issued? Was there any addressed at that point?
We weren't involved in any township decisions, so really not clear about that question. Once we were made aware that it met the statutory requirements for sand dune mining is when we became involved.
Okay. Being that the pond, well, here it is. Okay. Being that the initial pond was so recent, does it seem that the applicant was trying to get around the permitting process? Now that the initial pond is existing, the environmental impact of expanding the pond is obviously less than the initial impact of clearing and digging. Is this a consideration? So is that being considered, I guess?
I don't want to speak for Jason here, but the size of it, once it reaches that 5 acre threshold, it kicks in the 301 aspect. And once it became clear that sand was leaving the sand dune mining area, then it became a 637 issue. As far as the staging of the project and that type of thing, it obviously crossed that threshold and became something that required Eagle permitting, and that's why we're here tonight. So that's about as good as I can do with that one.
Yeah. Okay. Going back to, looks like somebody's got their hand raised. David S. So you are unmuted, David, on our end. If you want to mute yourself and go ahead and ask your question.
Yep. Thanks for taking my question. So given the fact that the applicant in their submission to the township and to Eagle has indicated the pond size as being 4.9, not 4.7, that's mighty close to 5. And I'm wondering if Eagle will require a survey, and if they do not, why not?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So who wants to address the question on, can you require a survey, or will you require a survey?
Well, I guess I can say we can certainly ask the applicant if they have a survey of the pond currently.
Okay. So, okay. And it looks like Richard's got his hand up again. Richard, do you want to, well, unmute you. You can go ahead and go.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Farragon, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Jennifer, said in her presentation that the already excavated sand will be remaining on the site for grading. The application, however, says in the second paragraph of the environmental impact statement, in the second paragraph of the response to section A, the Van Horns have advised in their application that issuance of the permit will allow the large stockpiles from pond creation to be removed from the site. If they are indeed, as they are telling Eagle in their application, that they will be removing the sand from the site, how does that change your analysis of the legality of the prior 2 years operation?
So I want to kind of make sure I'm hearing this correctly. They do propose to remove the stockpiles that are on the site, on the 29 acre site, and would be able to do that under a permit. So in order to resolve the fact that there is sand on the site, I mean, it would be resolved through a permit, or at least the application for a permit. I don't know if that really answers your question.
Okay, well, and then, and I'll address this also in the formal part, so I appreciate your answering my questions now. Would then, I think you answered my question, but would the application then have to address all of this, provide the information that's required as conditions existed before the Van Horns began their operation 2 years ago, as opposed to, well, it's already existing?
We're handling it as it's already existing.
Why?
Because there was excavation that occurred prior to the need for a sand dune mining permit.
All right, I think we gotta get to a couple more questions, so I gotta keep moving here. Let's go to Dave. I think, well, somebody just put their hand down, so that person didn't have their hand up anymore. All right, looking at we're gonna take a couple more questions on my board here. For the environmental impact statement, how would a practicable alternative be identified, since the plan is to expand the pond to a lake? If you guys can see that, and if you want to address that in terms of the environmental impact statement, it says, how would a practical alternative be identified since the plan to expand a pond to a lake?
I think the idea behind that question is really for starting a mining operation, you know, from scratch. And obviously this one's a little bit unique in that, you know, the project is, the goal of the project is really to create a lake. And it also involves excavating sand and removing it out of a sand dune mining area. And that's why a sand dune mining permit is also required. But, you know, the lake creation piece of this is you know, part of what's being developed in that area. And, you know, and that's kind of the driver to this, rather than, you know, a sand dune mining operation per se, as the statute, you know, also has sites like that, where the purpose of the site, the primary purpose of the site is really for the mining of sand. So it's kind of a little bit unique in that respect. And you know, the developer here wants to create a lake, and it also in doing so is going to you know, overlap with our statute. So you know, it's you know, the alternative piece is you know, not as applicable as it would be for a mine location.
All right, thanks, Mark. Last question here. What about the large volume of sand moved to Padnos property in 2019 and is still on the Padnos property? You guys aware of that? And do you want to address that?
I can address that. So in the definition of sand dune mining, it's the removal of sand from sand dune areas. And the Padnos property is within the sand dune area. So therefore, the part 637 doesn't apply.
Okay. All right. There was a couple other questions that came in. Looks like we had they're kind of repeats of questions we've already had, but I'm going to be sharing them with the staff and team here to see if there's anything they want to follow up directly on. And at the end, I will share the contact information for a team that are here. So if you want to send them an email directly with your specific question, you can do that as well. But at this point, we're getting a little bit later in the evening, so we need to turn it over to the next part of our evening, which is the public comment period. So I want to thank you all for participating in the first part, the Q&A and the formal presentation. But now we're going to turn it over to our hearings officers, and what they're going to do is read a hearing statement. It's kind of official thing we have to do, and we're going to kick off the official hearing part of the night. So up on the screen, you can also see other ways to submit an official comment, so you don't have to voice your comment tonight. You can also submit it through these ways that are on your screen as well. If you're on the phone, I know you can't see this, and I'll read those off after they're done. So Jason or Mark, who's going to go first to kick it off?
I'll go first, Jim.
Okay, go ahead and read. You can read it now.
All right. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jason Combs, and I am the district representative in the Water Resources Division of the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. I will be serving as the hearing officer for this public hearing on Eagle submission number HP2-Z458-DNRMA. With me tonight are staff from the Oil, Gas, and Minerals Division of Eagle. Mark Snow, Oil, Gas, Minerals Division Manager and Co-Hearing Officer. Jennifer Farragon with the Oil, Gas, and Minerals Division Permits and Bonding Unit, and Stafford Dusenberry, Oil, Gas, and Minerals Division Geologist. To describe how this is going to work tonight, we will begin with some background information about why we are here tonight. We will then describe the purpose of the hearing and how your comments will be used. Following that, I'll outline the procedures under which we will take your comments and then describe what will happen after tonight's hearing. It will then be time for you to provide comments, and we will spend the majority of time tonight listening to those comments. At the end of the hearing, I'll provide a short summary in closing. By way of background information, the Water Resources Division is responsible for administering a variety of programs that help protect inland lakes and streams, wetlands, floodplains, sand dunes, and the Great Lakes. These programs regulate certain activities such as dredging or filling a lake, stream or wetland, constructing a dam, constructing a marina, placing shore protection or constructing docks, and building in a designated critical sand dune area, wetland, or floodplain. The law governing these responsibilities is the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act, 1994 PA 451, as amended. We are here tonight because Chad and Jenny Van Horn, Beachside Farms LLC, has proposed the following: to expand an existing pond to an approximately 10.7 acre lake by excavating from upland approximately 180,606 cubic yards in an area approximately 1,653 feet long, 295 feet wide, and a maximum depth of 20 feet. Now, in order for a permit to be granted for the pond expansion, Eagle must find that the proposed activities described in the public notice meet certain criteria set by Part 301, which is the Inland Lakes and Streams of Act Part 451 of 1994. In general, we must consider the effects of the proposed project on the lake when reviewing an application for a permit under the provisions of Part 301 of Act 451. Eagle is charged to make the following considerations as required by Section 30106 of Part 301. Number one, the permit shall issue a permit if it finds that the structure or project will not adversely affect the public trust or riparian rights. And to give you a little background on what the public trust is essentially the rights of people to fish, to boat, and deals with protecting lakes and streams from pollution. Riparian rights are defined as the right to access navigable waters, for dockage for navigable waters. Also, we call that wharfage as well. The use of water for general purposes such as bathing, and then the title for natural accretions. So just to give you a definition for that. The other consideration is that the department shall not grant a permit if the proposed project or structure will unlawfully impair or destroy any of the waters or other natural resources of the state. The purpose of tonight's hearing is to give anyone interested in Chad and Jenny Van Horn and Beachside Farms LLC an opportunity to provide information that Eagle can use in making the decision whether or not to issue a permit. Please recognize that Eagle can only use the information you provide if it relates to the criteria that Eagle must use in making a decision. Some of you may simply want to express your support or opposition to the project. We will be happy to make note of your position, but please understand that Eagle is, by law, not allowed to base our decision on whether or not there is widespread support or opposition to the project. In addition to applying for a permit for pond expansion, Chad and Jenny Van Horn have also submitted an application for a sand dune mining permit. And Mark Snow with the Oil, Gas, and Minerals Division will now give a few words before we begin taking comment.
Thanks, Jason. Similar to Jason, I'd like to provide some background information about why we're here. I'll then describe the purpose of the hearing and how your comments will be used. We'll be accepting comments on both permit applications. Jason will then outline the procedures under which we will take your comments and describe what will happen after tonight's hearing. To give some background information, the Oil, Gas, and Minerals Division is responsible for administering programs that regulate oil and gas development, some types of waste disposal wells used for mineral exploration, and several mining activities in Michigan. One such mining activity is sand dune mining, which is the removal of sand from a sand dune area for commercial or industrial purposes. The OGMD enforces regulations that address issues such as plans for mining and reclamation. The law governing the responsibilities is the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act, 1994, Public Act 451, as amended. We are here tonight because Chad and Jenny Van Horn have submitted an application for a sand dune mining permit. This project is located within a designated sand dune area. They propose to remove excavated sand stockpiled from the creation of a 5-acre pond. They also plan to remove sand that will be excavated during future pond expansion. Although the main purpose of the sand removal is for the creation and expansion of the pond, the sand will be used for commercial industrial purposes. Removal of sand from a sand dune area for commercial or industrial purposes requires a permit from Eagle. In order to receive a permit from Eagle to engage in sand dune mining, a person must submit several documents. The required information for the proposed activity is prescribed in regulations as includes the following: a permit application form, an environmental impact statement, and a mining and reclamation plan, including a 15-year mining plan. A permit is valid for 5 years and must be renewed if the activities comply with the rules and regulations in permit. Permit must be denied if, after review of the environmental impact statement, Eagle determines that the proposed activity is likely to pollute, impair, or destroy the air, water, or other natural resources or the public trust in those resources. The Oil, Gas, and Minerals Division is here to receive comments on the sand dune mining application for the Van Horn site pursuant to Part 637, sand dune mining, of the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act. The Oil, Gas, and Minerals Division is not required to conduct this public hearing under any provisions of Part 637, but it's being held in accordance with the Administrative Procedures Act, number 306 of the Public Acts of 1969, as amended and at the request of citizens who have requested a hearing. I'll now turn it back over to Jason to go over some of the procedures.
Thanks, Mark. In just a moment, I will outline the procedures we will use for taking your comments. But before I do so, I need to mention that the notice of this hearing was published in the Saugatuck Commercial Record on February 11th, 2021. As we discussed at the beginning of the informational session, if you have a comment to provide, click on the question box in your GoToWebinar toolbar and enter the word comment, enter your name. To ensure that the hearing is conducted in a fair manner, we will follow these steps. First, Eagle has described the proposed project. Second, we will then call on those who have indicated in the comment box that they would like to speak in the general order received. As a reminder, if you are participating in this hearing via telephone only, you will only be able to provide comments during this hearing comment period. However, you may submit your comments to Eagle via MyWaters, email, or by US mail. If you've written comments or materials that you would like to present, please email them to me, upload them into MyWaters, or send them to me via US mail to the Kalamazoo District Office. When all the comments have been completed, we'll ask if anyone else would like to make a statement. And please note that if you send any documents to me, they will also be passed along to the Oil, Gas, and Minerals Division as well. So number 3, when your name is called, your microphone will be unmuted. As you begin your comments, please state your name and any group or association you may represent. Each person will be given 4 minutes to make their comments. I will indicate to you, or it will be indicated to you when you have 30 seconds left. Please begin wrapping up your comments and end within the allotted time. If need be, it will be indicated when your time has ended. I ask that we will all be courteous and respectful to one another tonight. Only one person should be speaking at a time. Please do not interrupt the speaker, and please also recognize that Eagle staff is here tonight to provide a fair opportunity for you to express your comments on the proposed project and to listen to those comments. Now, this hearing is being recorded, and your comments will be a part of the information Eagle will consider in making its decision on whether or not to issue a permit on the proposed project. The public comment period for this public hearing is open for 10 days from the date of this hearing, ending on March 5th, 2021. Additional information and comments submitted in writing during the 10-day public comment period will also be considered in Eagle's decision. Additional information and comments may be submitted to me, to Jason Combs, at the Kalamazoo District Office at 7953 Adobe Road, Kalamazoo, Michigan 49009-5025. Following the close of the public comment period, Eagle will make a decision to either issue a permit for the project as proposed, or with modifications, or send a letter of denial. You may find out what the decision is by checking the Eagle MyWaters website at https mywaters.deq.state.mi.us/mywaters/hashtag/public notice/search, and searching for permit number HP2-Z458-DNRMA. Thank you for your attention. Jim will begin calling the names of those who have indicated that they would like to make a statement.
All right, thanks guys. So just a couple things before we get started here. Just want to clarify that what I'm going to do is basically when some of you pre-registered to attend this hearing, and when you pre-registered, you were asked if you wanted to make a comment. And for those of you that checked yes, I'm going to be going through that list and calling your names first in the order in which you had registered. After we go through that list of people who said they wanted to comment ahead of time, then what we'll do is open it up for anybody else. So at that point, you can raise your hand and we'll call on you in the order in which you raised your hand. We're going to give everybody 4 minutes, and I will let you know. I'll probably actually let you know about when you have 1 minute left, just so you can start wrapping up. And so what you want to do is I want to call up, basically I'll call the name of the first person on my list as well as the person that's on deck, so you can be ready. And when we call your name, Ryan's going to find your name in our list and we'll unmute you and we'll tell you when you're ready to go. Make sure that when you are called up that you restate your name and also any organization or association you might be affiliated with. And I think that covers it. So with that, we're going to call the first person up my list. It's Roy McElwain. And Ryan's going to unmute you. And sir, you can unmute yourself. Go ahead.
I have done it. Thank you for your time.
All right, good. You have 4 minutes, sir.
Okay. I've modified my comments a little bit because I want to spend the 4 minutes, I think, on the size of the pond. We hit a key issue here that based on the money we have spent on aerial survey and measurements by 3 different methods and 3 different people, one a certified engineer, we keep arriving at a 6.5 acre pond based on water surface, not the total excavation size. And if that is the case, then it seems like a survey has to be done before Eagle can make any kind of a determination of approving the permits. Because if it was violated and it's got 6.5 acres, there's no way that what has been submitted is accurate. Well, that's my point on that. I also just want to make a comment that when you go over the timeline from the day that in September of 2018 that a permit was issued by the township for a pond that would be 4.9 acres. No one had, of course, any say in that. It's just a standard pond permit, and nobody envisioned a pond 20 feet deep with the volume of sand that arrived. Let's see. If we have a 6.5 acre pond, now we have a lake, which we think is 6.5 acres. And that's again, I'll bring that up as a critical issue. But the township back in April made a provision that if he got sand mining permit approval from the township, he had to get the necessary state permits. Now, the whole summer went by. Mr. Van Hoorn made no effort, apparently, to submit any type of permitting papers, and then starts to remove sand to commercial operations. And only because of some vigilant people in the neighborhood was this discovered. And then, of course, in October, he got the letter from you folks and from the township to cease. My point being that if you look at the whole history of this, Mr. Van Hoorn knew from day one that he was going to go for a 10.7 or 10.9 acre lake, not a pond. And he started with the 4.9 acres. By design or by error, he's got it bigger than 6.5 probably. And now he's turned around after all this time, and after getting a letter in October from you folks, he finally submits permits, applications, which the township said were a necessary requirement to make the special approval use for sand mining valid. So it's been a cart in front of the horse the whole time. And I just feel that any permit,
You have 1 minute left.
I feel that any permitting of this is actually permitting something that's after the fact. And there must be some regulations and consideration given to the fact that all this has not been an upfront operation to create a 10.7 acre lake, 20 feet deep. And it does not fit in with the neighborhood, and we'll hear other comments tonight, so I'm sure, to that effect. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir, for your comment. All right, so the next person on my list is Terrence Shull, and after Terrence is going to be Scott W. So we're looking for Terrence. Terrence, you can unmute yourself and go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Make sure you restate your name and any association you're with.
This is Terrence Shull. I own Shull LLC, which is a motel directly behind the sand pile. My concerns are solely as a business owner. I've already gotten complaints for the noise and disruptions of trucking the sand, which he was doing in October, from guests at my motel. My concerns are the early morning operation running all day, because I think, correct me, I might be wrong, he was allowed to do from 7 in the morning till 6 at night, which is, I think, a bit excessive for when you're running a motel. My other concern was trucks were getting backed up in front of my property, which I think would be a safety issue when we're trying to come and go from the motel. I have two driveways. It's a circle driveway, basically. The other thing I wanted to address is that when the crane is back there operating, I have a guest house as well, and my guest house, like everything in my cupboards, is rattling. I'm just trying to make these points on record. And then no one's talked about the financial aspect of this for neighboring businesses. My motel, which is seasonal, and if he's trucking the sand, I mean, this could directly impact my busy season, as well as I think you will hear from some other folks that have the same issues with seasonal rentals in the area. We're going to have complaints. I don't know how we can put a dollar figure on that until after the fact. I mean, I could throw out some numbers, but I think that would be a moot point. The other thing, if I asked the township this, if this is permitted, then what do I have to do for these complaints that I get from guests? And then the other fact is, I'm wondering, is there any way, if you do allow this, if he could not use the driveway that he's been using and actually relocate the driveway to 135th because of my concerns with the trucks right in front of my business, my place of business, and alongside my place of business for the noise aspect of the whole trucking operation. The weekend that he did this in October was just horrific for my business, I feel. So those are my only concerns at this point. I will also send this in writing later on. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comment. Okay, up next we've got Scott Waringa, and after Scott Waringa, it's Scott Howard. So it looks like Scott Waringa's got his hand up. So, and now it's down. Hold on just a second. Scott, Ryan's gonna find you and unmute you.
Got it. Now can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, we got you. So go ahead and restate your name, and you got 4 minutes.
Yep. Thanks. My name is Scott Waringa, and I own a residence at 6618 Dugout Road in Saugatuck Township. I am within 1,000 feet of the proposed sand dune mining operation. I strongly oppose both the sand dune mining operation and the expansion of the water ski lake. Saugatuck is a beautiful resort town surrounded by quiet natural areas. A commercial sand dune mining operation has no place here and is not at all compatible with the surrounding area, especially given the comments we just heard from Mr. Shaw. Mr. Van Horn would like you to look past that fact, and he argues that his water ski lake development is compatible. I strongly disagree with that assertion also, as I currently enjoy the peace and quiet of being tucked into the McEnroe Conservation Easement. The thought of having to listen to a speedboat screaming back and forth on a 10-acre lake is very disturbing. He tries to make the argument that this development is the best use of the land and is taking an unproductive piece of land and making it productive. As a realtor, he surely knows the value of wooded 5 to 10 acre lots, which would have been very profitable or extremely compatible with the surrounding area, and from a business perspective, would have been very profitable as the cost would have been minimal compared to his water ski lake development, and that also would have increased the property tax base for the township. The application states that there will be and has been no negative effect on the groundwater. However, when the current 6-acre pond was being excavated, I had a period of several months where I would have sediment in my well water every time I turned the faucet on. Unfortunately, I didn't put it together at that time that it might have something to do with the construction of the pond. It did eventually clear up, and I didn't think about it again until I saw that my well information was listed in the water study as being one of the closest wells to the site. I'm very concerned that if they resume excavation, I'll again have water issues. Over the last several years, I've seen Mr. Van Horn not live up to his word with the township, starting with a clear bait and switch application for a 5-acre pond, knowing that his end goal was a 10-acre water ski lake development. And I would point out that he already had environmental study stuff going on in 2018. If you only planned a 5-acre pond, why do an environmental study? Once the township approved the pond, he had it excavated, resulting in a 70-foot pile of sand. He had the township between a rock and a hard spot, and they approved an SAU to remove the sand, provided he obtained all the appropriate permits. He then ignored the requirements of the SAU. He operated outside of the permitted hours, and I had to file a complaint with the township, and they had to remind him that he could not operate outside of the hours of 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. He dug a pond that exceeds 6 acres in clear violation of the township permit and Eagle rules. He started removing sand in October 2020, which we've heard about. And
You have 1 minute left.
Thanks. and continued until he was sent letters by the township and Eagle. The terms of the township SAU were clear that Eagle permits were required prior to removing the sand, and he was told via a letter from Eagle in August 2020 that any mover of sand would require a permit. Only after notices from Eagle and the township did he apply for the permit you have before you now. There was also a suit against Saugatuck Township requiring him to put in fire suppression lines in his development. I watched the fire department appeals meeting where his attorney repeatedly stated that the lot in question was not a part of a development. And yet in this application, the project is repeatedly referred to as a development. There is no reason to grant this sand mining permit because the project does not qualify for one. And there is no reason to believe that Mr. Van Horn will abide by any of the requirements that will be set forth in the permit. He will say what he needs to get the permit and then do as he pleases. Thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you, sir. Up next, we've got Scott Howard. Then after Scott, it's going to be David Swan. So Scott Howard, you can unmute yourself. And
thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you. Scott Howard with the law firm of Olson, Bistock and Howard, and I'm an attorney for the Saugatuck Dunes Coastal Alliance. I want to focus my comments on some technical details of the application, and that specifically is the threshold issue of whether or not this application is even complete based on the lack of information that's been provided. Specifically, under Part 301, there's a substantial analysis that needs to happen, and the applicant needs to provide the department with the ability to address those reviews and concerns, and that hasn't happened here. I want to start with first the alternatives analysis that's required by Part 301. Under Part 301, the application requires an alternatives analysis from any applicant, and the applicant is required to, quote, detail all options considered and why their plan is the least impactful, feasible, and prudent proposal. The application, in this case, directions state that at a minimum, this should include variables such as alternative locations, including other properties, configurations and sizes, layout and design, and methods, construction technology, and other constraints, local regulations, resource issues. Discussion should also include why the, quote, do nothing alternative is not feasible or prudent. In this case, the response that is contained in the application simply lists several alternatives without any explanation. The application says, quote, project alternatives, larger lake, different configurations of lake, deeper excavation, hydraulic lake, creation instead of mechanical excavation, dewatering in order to create the lake in the dry, no connection exists or is proposed to any state or federal water. That's the full and complete extent of what of the application's analysis of feasible and prudent alternatives. The application fails to detail why their plan is the least impactful, feasible, and prudent proposal, which is required by the statute. The response also fails to evaluate any other possible locations for the project, and beyond just listing a larger or different configurations of the pond, the response fails to explain why any of the, quote, alternatives were rejected. Finally, and maybe most importantly, the application fails to explain why leaving the pond at its current size is not feasible and prudent. The rules are clear, and this information is required. The other part that the statute is clear on is project mitigation and compensation.
In 1 minute.
Thank you. The narrative of the application should address, quote, how the proposed impacts will be compensated, mitigated, or minimization measures, including amount, location, and method of why the mitigation should be required. The applicant replies by saying, there is no compensation proposed for this project. There are no impacts to state or federally regulated waters. Activities will result in creation of an aquatic resource which otherwise would not exist on the site. Again, that's the sum total of the response in the application, and it's not consistent with what the with what Eagle's rules require. And it does not consider the public trust, riparian rights, and the environment, as was stated earlier in this evening, and it does not ensure that adverse impacts will be minimal. These analysis have to be here, have to be in the application, and they don't exist here. All you have are conclusory statements, and as such, you don't have a complete application. The rules are clear about this, and for that reason alone, this application should be denied. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening and holding a public hearing on this application.
Okay, thank you, sir, for your comments. Okay, so next person up is David Swan. And then after David, it's going to be Marguerite Kearney. So Mr. Swan, you have been unmuted, so you can go ahead.
Thanks. You can hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Beautiful. Jason, Jennifer, Mark, Stafford, as you all very well know, there are many issues with this incomplete permit application, especially the EIS and the approach this developer has taken. I will submit a letter fully detailing my concerns by the deadline of March 5th. All of us who have already spoken could go on for at least an hour with the many issues. I encourage Eagle to do the right thing. The application's EIS is inaccurate and deficient. The EIS is drafted from the perspective of the project as it exists, post clear cut, post excavation, post removal of sand from the sand dune area, not the project as it was contemplated before the unpermitted, thus illegal activity began. The applicant has been in real estate for decades. He has sold houses located within Michigan's sand dune area for decades. He is currently the listing agent for the North Shore of Saugatuck proposed marina development. The applicant knows well enough about Part 637 that when he presented his development concept to Saugatuck Township, he referenced the Hal Fitch and Adam Wiegand decision that the excavation of a proposed marina, because it is for recreation, is not considered sand dune mining. And I look forward to debating that at a later date. The applicant knew exactly what he was doing when he clear-cut a mature red pine forest, habitat to two species of owl that are listed on the Michigan State Threatened Species List, and then proceeded to excavate nearly 150,000 tons of sand, all without a permit. Eagle will be inviting all developers to take this approach to questionable and destructive land use changes if they grant Chad Van Horn an after-the-fact sand dune mining permit. I'm asking Eagle to follow the law and deny the permit and require the applicant to return the land to its original condition. There is certainly case law, and I emphasize that, there is certainly case law that supports a denial of an after-the-fact permit request and a reclamation of the land to its previous condition. And finally, I heard Jason say earlier, he will require a survey. We should and must have a survey to verify the size of the original excavation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, next person that's requested to make a comment, Marguerite Kearney. And after Marguerite Kearney is Nicholas Wallace. So Marguerite Kearney, you've been unmuted, so you can go ahead.
Great, thank you very much. My name is Margarita Kearney, and I'm a senior attorney at the Environmental Law and Policy Center. I'm here tonight representing the Saugatuck Dunes Coastal Alliance to provide comments on the sand dune mining permit application. We'll also submit more detailed written comments, but we appreciate the opportunity to provide oral comments to you here tonight. Mr. Swan hit on a key point here. This is an after the fact permit, and it's a significant after the fact permit. From the slides that we saw earlier today, this mining operation alone will extract roughly the total amount of sand mined in Michigan last year. While Eagle has the authority to issue after the fact permits in some cases, it is not compelled to do so. And its power to reject an after the fact permit and issue an order to restore the land has, as Mr. Swan mentioned, been upheld by Michigan courts in some situations. When considering an after the fact permit request, Eagle must require the applicant to submit information and meet requirements as if the unpermitted activity had not been conducted. So in other words, and I think this is contrary to the way it was explained earlier in the question and answer, the application needs to be drafted from the perspective of an applicant who's not yet conducted any work at the site. To allow an applicant to do otherwise would be contrary to law, because it would apply different and less stringent requirements to actors who apply for after the fact permits than to people who apply for timely permits. We don't want to reward people, and the law should not treat people more favorably if they ignore the requirements, conduct the work, and then go back later and submit a permit application. This would be really bad policy. It would make the standards for after the fact permits easier to achieve than timely permits. It would encourage people to begin work without seeking a permit and just ask for a permit later if they're required or if someone calls in, and then they would get the benefit of lower standards, so they'd be more likely to get that permit. With that context in mind, it's clear that the Van Horn application fails to meet the requirements under the Sand Dune Mining Act, and an after the fact permit should not be granted. The EIS is an amazing example of this flaw. It is drafted from the perspective of the project as it exists after the work was started, after it was clear that sand dune mining was taking place, not the project as it was contemplated before the unpermitted activity began. The EIS, for example, states, no sand dunes will be impacted by the expansion because it's currently cleared and used for work area and stockpiling of excavated soils. That certainly makes it very easy to meet all the standards if you can't have an environmental impact because you've already caused the environmental impact to occur. Thank you. Even if the EIS were from the perspective of the project prior to that unpermitted activity, it is still insufficiently descriptive and unsupportive. For example, the law requires an environmental impact statement to consider the impact of the proposed sand dune mining activity on flora, fauna, or wildlife habitats. The Van Horn EIS just asserts that there will be no new impact, but fails entirely to analyze or describe the impact of the project, especially if they'd timely applied for a permit. Saugatuck Dunes Coastal Alliance respectfully suggests to Eagle that they should deny the permit and issue an order to restore because the sand dune mining application does not comply with the legal requirements. Thank you very much for the time.
Okay, thank you. All right, last person in terms of my list here, and then we'll open it up for everybody else. Nicholas Wallace. So Nicholas Wallace, you've been unmuted and you can go ahead and make your comment.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity for you to offer my comments during today's hearing. My name is Nicholas Wallace and my family's property is located at 3524 Dugout Road. I'd like to raise some concerns that myself and my family have in regard to this specific development. First and foremost, the further excavation of over 180,000 cubic yards on top of the already staggeringly large sand mining piles poses a great risk to the biodiversity of the area. The now monoculture red pine forest immediately adjacent to the applicant area has been observed to home, as David Swan previously mentioned, 2 of Michigan's threatened owl species, the northern saw-whet owl and the long-eared owl. Long before Van Horn purchased this property, my family and myself frequently explored this land in search of seasonal mushrooms. And in doing so, we observed many of the common habits of the wildlife in the area, including the observation of owl pellets. So they are in the area. There's staggering biodiversity in this section of Allegan County in regards to plants, mammals, herpetofauna, which are reptiles and amphibians, insects, and migratory birds. The unique habitat of the Kalamazoo River mouth at large supports this kind of diversity and is being threatened by the applicant as well as the North Shore development immediately across the street. The applicant's proposal also does not speak to or accurately capture the character of the area as previously stated by many. These areas have gone untouched for a very long time, and just recently has this trend of environmentally intrusive development swept across the township. I urge the EGLE to do the right thing and consider the very serious ecological impacts such a development can have in regard to habitat destruction and wildlife displacement. A personal note on this: since Van Horn has began his development, we have seen in our property the amount of deer, turkey, and other mammals. We've seen a huge increase in just a general amount of wildlife by us, suggesting that they are being pushed across the street towards Pine Trail Camp and being completely displaced. I also saw an eagle in the area as well. The state of Michigan is known for its wild places and should be leading the nation by example on how to maintain and preserve such places. And following a general trend across the state, this does not appear to be happening. Thank you for your comment, and I will submit a more in-detailed comment at a later date.
All right, thank you, sir. Okay, so that's the end of my list of people who had pre-registered and asked to comment. So at this time, what we'll do is open it up for anybody else that'd like to make a comment. And if you haven't commented already and you want to make a comment tonight, you can click the raise hand icon and we'll call your name and unmute you just like we've been doing. If you're on the phone, and we do have a couple people that have called in, you'd like to make a comment, you hit #2, the little pound sign and then 2, and we'll call on you that way too. Before I do that, I want to bring up my other screen. Just want to remind you that if you don't get all your comment in tonight or think of something else you want to add as a comment, you can do it later by the ways we have up on the screen, by email or by the website or by mail. And I'll read those off again later too. All right, so it looks like we've got a few people with their hands up that want to make a comment. The first person is John Helmrich. So John, we're unmuting your line. And again, you've got 4 minutes, and make sure you restate your name and any association or organization you might be with. So go ahead, you've been unmuted.
Great. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we can. Go
Great.
ahead.
Hey, thank you, Jason, for all your hard work and this opportunity tonight. I was not originally planning to make comments, so I don't have a written thing to read, but I do want to weigh in both as a resident of Saugatuck Township who lives within a half a mile of this property. And also I'm a member of the Saugatuck Township Board. I'm also their ex officio member of the Planning Commission. I just want to share some facts for everyone to keep in perspective here. And as again, I'm not speaking on behalf of the township, but those are the facts of who I am. The original pond permit that Van Horn got was granted in October of 2018 by a zoning administrator for the township who resigned 1 or 2 weeks after the fact. In November of 2018, we had a recall election here in the township in which we ended up replacing the entire board of the township, and I'm part of that. And then we also made several changes to our planning commission. So we are grappling with this issue that was approved before we were in place, and it's a major concern. It's been stated already that the original permit for the pond, which was not to exceed 4.9 acres, actually did, which, as I said, is a concern for us. There are mountains of sand on the property. It has not all been removed. I don't know the height of it, but you've seen it, I think, and it remains a problem for us. He exceeded the permit size. There's also concern that these properties are adjacent to the Pine Trail Camp, which we're told may possibly be up for sale in the near future. And that property is also adjacent to the North Shore properties owned by Jeffrey Padnos, which has been mentioned earlier, and the fact that Chad Van Horn is the real estate agent for those properties. So there's an issue here of connectivity and what might be a grand plan that we don't know about. And I just that's all I wanted to share with you as I said, as a resident, but I am a township board member, and I thank you for having this hearing. And I hope all those facts and the timing will be considered in your final determination. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comment. Next person up, John Johnson. John Johnson, you have been unmuted, so you
Hi
go
there.
ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You can go ahead.
Awesome, awesome. Is there any way where you can get I can show a few pictures. My name is John Johnson. My full-time residence is directly across the street from you guys there, and I also have a few seasonal rentals there as well as part of Saugatuck Cottage Suites. But I was going to share some pictures of the sand and some of the problems that it's created on my property.
If you have like pictures or documents, that's something you can submit to us, just like you would at a live public hearing. There's an email that's on the screen right now. You can send them right to Jason directly or by mail on the address there.
Okay, I'll go ahead and do that. I was going to put those up for everybody to see as well. But thank you all of you for having this forum. And I have two concerns: sand and sound. So some of this might be slightly repetitive, but those huge piles of sand there. We get some pretty windy weather, and like last year in October, and we had the gales of November coming in combination with some rain. And the cars on several occasions, and it seemed like it was particularly around October, November last year, got covered in a coat of thin sand or sand with water kind of mixed in. I have pictures of, the slider doors, and the fine sand gets through the screen and makes its way to the wheels that glide back and forth, causing some damage to those. We have all new doors, windows, probably $50,000, $60,000 nearly of new windows and doors put in across the street here over the past several years. And there's pictures of where some of the wearing has happened, because what's sandpaper made of? Sand. Same thing with the windows. The mailboxes are closed. You're welcome to come by and check them out. You open them up and they're full of sand. Gets in the garages. I had to replace 4 garage pads, working to varying degrees because of the sand getting into where the minute touch pads are. But I'm less than 1,000 feet away. I don't have much against, a nice development, but in terms of speedboats going back and forth really loud across the street, which would really be, that would be a sound issue. Shawl, thank you for mentioning it too. We got complaints there, particularly around October, that we got those as well from guests, particularly because of the trucks and everything. It was is there a way to tarp some of the sand? I mean, from what I understood, there was 420,000 yards. That's equivalent to 11,340,000 square feet of sand that's piled up. That's a lot of sand. You get some good winds coming by, and that's going to get into every nook and cranny across the street, and probably even further with some good winds behind it. So I'm going to try to just come full circle. So in terms of sand, what can we do to control the sand that you have there in piles right now?
1 minute.
Thank you. And what can we do in terms of keeping the sound under control, for our wonderful vacationers coming here to Saugatuck to enjoy the nature and go on trails? And in light of everything going on with COVID, we had a lot of people just using trails and walking around and enjoying a lot of the nature around the area. And we got a lot of noise and a lot of destruction of nature and natural habitats. In addition to something that's we have the sound going on with construction, but the sound of the boats is gonna be a forever thing if that thing's gonna be 10 acres. And can we please get the sand that goes airborne really quickly, because all those large sand dunes under control as soon as possible, because that's costing me a lot in cleaning fees. Please, please. That's it for right now. I just looked at this as a bouncing board, so I'm glad that we're having this. Let's all work together and see if we can come up with some solutions. But it's gonna. I don't even want to put numbers together because I enjoy doing what I'm doing. I have 2 jobs. I go 6 days a week. I love working. But let's all be fair and good neighbors and play together in the sandbox appropriately. But let's get some of this damage under control.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your comment. Next person with their hand up is Frank Alfieri. Frank Alfieri, you are being unmuted, so you can go ahead and mute yourself and make your comment. There you go.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jim. My name is Dr. Frank Alfieri. My practice is located at 3484 Blue Star Highway, corner of Holland Street, directly across from this project. I practiced here for 40 years. This project has been very disruptive to my practice and my patients. Beginning with the construction, the chainsaws, the heavy equipment, occasional shaking of the building, the noise is unbelievable. And again, as people have mentioned, when we get a hard northwest wind, we have sand all over our automobiles, and my patients are not happy about that. Now they want to haul sand out of there for the next 2 to 3 years. That's ridiculous. This type of activity is not acceptable, and the sand mining permit should be denied. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next person up wants to make a comment is Mary Terzino. You can unmute your line. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
My name is Mary Terzino. My husband and I live at 3500 Dugout Road, and I'm speaking tonight as an individual to oppose the request for pond expansion and related permits. It seems clear, as others have noted, that all along the pond was merely an interim step towards the plan to dig a 10+ acre lake, with the developer starting small, digging on a township permit, and that in turn has led Eagle to treat the current pond and the barren moonscape of sand piles as already existing, as if nature had created them, avoiding the need for review of prior pre-permit human activity on the site, which from the comments tonight appears to be well worth examining. The developer's been quoted saying that a water skiing lake has been a family dream. My family's dream was a wooded, semi-rural residence with abundant trees and wildlife, near old dunes, and low traffic and noise disruption, aesthetically consistent with this area of the township. The development to date, much less what is now proposed, has already damaged these features. Clear cutting has denuded the land, it's displaced wildlife, and development thus far has created aesthetically unpleasant views, highly visible because of the extensive tree clearance. The moonscape of bare sand mountains is inconsistent with other natural features in the area, as is the man-made rectangular water skiing pond. And the proposed commercial mining of 420,000 cubic yards will only make this worse. It will create a great deal of public mistrust for many of us neighbors. In addition, with plans to build 17 homes and expand the pond and dig up more sand in the process, which will be moved by heavy equipment, we will be bothered by even more construction noise and increased traffic for the indefinite future, particularly when you count in the speedboats. So much for our quiet enjoyment. In sum, the environmental alterations are already more extensive and intensive than neighbors expected. And no one told us back in 2018 that we'd be here talking about even more alterations, a nearly 11-acre lake, and even more sand removal. I urge the department to deny permits to increase the size of the man-made pond by mining additional sand. And at minimum, there should be, as others have said, a formal professional survey of the existing pond size, given the many questions and concerns about whether the size is truly under 5 acres before any further permitting occurs. And if it's larger than 5 acres, the department should go back to the original land condition when considering permits, requirements, and penalties. Thank you for your time and for your attention.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Last person I have here with their hand up right now is Richard Kirk. Richard Kirk, you can unmute. There you go. You can go ahead.
Thank you. This is Richard Kirk. I'm here in my own capacity. I'm also a member of the board of Saugatuck Dunes Coastal Alliance, but I'd be here and making comment regardless. Thank you for having the hearing. Thank you for having it far outside of your own work hours at the department so that we can all participate outside of our work hours. I'm asking that the department deny this application because the Van Horns have already engaged in sand dune mining without a permit at this site. They have not submitted this application in good faith. You can't be a little bit pregnant. Mr. Snow has already acknowledged that the sand dune mining statute applies. Now, he tried to downplay that because this is a unique situation, but the statute contemplates the exact situation that we are in. And there's nothing in the statute that says you can let things slide if you have something unique. This statute applies with its full force and effect, and the department must operate under its strictures. Ms. Farragon has said, and I appreciate that she answered my questions. She says that the operation that was begun 2 years ago does not require a permit. Both she, the department in general, and the Van Horns in their application have treated this as two different undertakings. There was an undertaking for the original pond, and now we have an undertaking here. Let's go ahead and run with that. According to the department, according to the application, the undertaking to expand the size of the pond has not yet commenced. But the department has already found the Van Horns in violation of the sand mining statute and issued a stop order last fall for the original undertaking, the original excavation. So that is irreconcilable with they don't need a permit for what they've already done. The department has already found that they did. It cannot treat what went on before as something that does not count. It does. So because the Van Horns have operated without a permit, I asked the department to request the Attorney General to bring an action to bar the sale of the sand already excavated, to prohibit any further excavation, to restore the site to the condition it was before the Van Horns began their unlawful operations 2 years ago, excuse me, and for other appropriate remedies as the department sees fit. Their operation will have a significant negative impact on existing land use in the area. There are interdunal wetlands, there are state and township parks, there are schools. The residents have already given you their own experiences and observations on what's gone on. There is a school in the immediate vicinity, the Oxbow, which is affiliated with the School of the Chicago Art Institute. The United States government recently recognized the historical and cultural significance of the immediate area to Native tribes.
Okay, 1 minute left.
Thank you. The mouth of the Kalamazoo River is the last undeveloped river mouth emptying into Lake Michigan in the state of Michigan. And the Van Horns, like other developers, are portraying this operation in isolation from these facts. And as a result, Saugatuck is being subjected to invasive developments that are destroying this cultural and natural environment. As Ms. Kearney pointed out, the best thing you can say about the environmental impact statement that the Van Horn submitted is that it's disingenuous. Their basic thread through all of this is we don't have to justify what we're doing because we have already cleared the land. And then that applies to their environmental descriptions, their inventory of the physical environment, and their refusal to submit a surface or overburden stripping plan. So for all of these reasons, the insufficiency of their application, the disingenuousness of calling the operations that they've already undertaken as not requiring a permit, all requires the denial of this application. Thank you very, very much for your consideration and your time.
All right, thank you, sir, for your comment. Okay, I'm going to give it another couple seconds to see if anybody else would like to make a comment. Just a reminder, if you would like to comment and you haven't done so already, you can click the raise hand button. Or if you're one of the people that are on the phone, you can click the #2 button, and that will allow you to comment. And while I'm waiting for people, just want to remind you that if you're on the phone and you want to submit a comment, you can't see my screen here, but you can email that comment to Jason Combs, and his email address is COMB as in Bravo, SJ, the number 8 at michigan.gov. Okay. Well, not seeing any other hands raised for comment, I am going to turn it over to Jason, who is going to wrap it up with the closing statement. So Jason, go ahead.
Thanks, Jim. All right. So thank you for your comments and cooperation. We appreciate your interest in the proposed project and that you took the time to be here tonight. As indicated at the beginning of the hearing, you may submit additional written comments until March 5th, 2021. Following the close of the public comment period, we will consider all comments received and make a decision on the proposed project. Just to remind those that may still want to submit a comment, comments can be submitted via MyWaters, email, or US mail. The hearing is now closed. Thank you again.
All right, thank you, Jason. And I'm just going to bring this slide up here, and that's who to contact for more information. So the official hearing part of this is closed. I'm going to leave this up here for a minute here. This is how you can get a hold of Jason or Jennifer, if especially if you had additional questions that maybe didn't get answered during the Q&A section. Their information is up there on the screen. And I think also in the chat, you'll notice that Ryan threw up there a couple links that you might want to check out. One being the way to comment through MyWaters. So if you click on that, it'll take you right to the place that you can go. And also Jason's email, of course, is there. Oh, so I think that's all for in terms of the content information. I want to thank everybody for sticking with us tonight and for all your thoughtful comments and for sticking with the time frames. I really appreciate that. Everybody got the chance to get in their comments. So I appreciate that. I'm gonna turn over to Mark. Mark, do you want to have any last parting words, I guess?
Yeah, I guess like you all, I'd like to thank everyone for their participation, their interest in this proposal and providing us comments, and wish you all a great evening.
All right, thanks, Mark. I want to remind everybody that the hearing tonight was recorded, and we will be putting it up on the Eagle YouTube channel. So I think if you Google Eagle YouTube, EGLE YouTube, you can go to our channel and find it there. Give us a day or two to put it up there. Also, usually we try to email everybody that registered for the hearing. We'll email you a link to that as well. So if you want to share it with somebody else, they can watch it, I guess. Thanks everybody for joining us, and have a great rest of your evening.